Good afternoon, and thank you for joining INSA's Wednesday Wisdom featuring Major General Michelle McGuinness. Before we begin, we'd like to share a video from our sponsor, Booz Allen Hamilton.
National security depends on staying ahead of the threat. Booz Allen's intelligence experts and innovators push the technical edge for today's mission and tomorrow's challenges. So together, we can combat adversaries, identify risks, analyze information, and apply emerging technologies for next-generation capabilities. When national security depends on you, we're here to propel your mission forward.
Now please welcome INSA's Vice President for Policy.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for Wednesday Wisdom. Today is a first for INSA as we welcome one of our Five Eyes partners to the program. Before we begin, let me make a couple of housekeeping notes. If you have questions, and we hope you do, please submit them through the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll do our best to get to all of your questions. We're pleased to welcome members of the press to the call today, so this is a reminder that this program is on the record. We couldn't deliver this kind of thought leadership without the support of our partners. So I'm pleased to welcome Robert Goodson, Vice President for Booz Allen Hamilton, who will introduce our speaker. Robert?
Thank you, Larry. I'd first like to thank INSA for hosting today's conversation. I think all of us have appreciated even more over the last 15 months the opportunities INSA provides for us to connect and discuss issues of national importance. Booz Allen, over our many years of support to the Department of Defense and the intelligence community, has seen the impact of sharing information and intelligence amongst our allies. We know our adversaries take advantage of the seams represented by national borders and competing foreign policies. The power of sharing amongst the Five Eyes allies narrows those seams, which has been especially important in the last 2 decades of war, and will continue to be arguably even more so as we evolve into an era of great power competition and gray zone conflicts. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker. Major General Michelle McGuinness is the Defense Intelligence Agency's 3rd Deputy Director for Commonwealth Integration. In this capacity, she serves as the DIA Director's Senior Advisor on all Five Eyes defense and intelligence issues, and works to increase collaboration and intelligence sharing between allies. Previously, General McGuinness was Director General of Counterproliferation and Terrorism at the Australian Defence Intelligence Organization. A career intelligence officer, she has served in several roles focusing on partner engagement and interoperability, including in the United States, as an Intelligence Capability Liaison Officer for the DIO. Welcome, General McGuinness.
Great. Thank you, Robert, and thank you to Booz Allen Hamilton for its support. And General McGuinness, welcome to INSA, and thank you for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you, Larry. It's a great privilege to be here at INSA today with you, especially hearing now that it is the first Five Eye partner you've had. So it really is a privilege. And thank you, Robert, for that kind introduction.
Great. So let's begin with a broad question. For those who don't know, what is the Five Eyes Partnership and why is it important to both the United States and its partners?
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. So 2 parts to this question. Let's stick at first, as you say, for those that don't know, the Five Eye Partnership is an expansive, trusted and enduring defence intelligence relationship between the UK, the US, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. So while its practical foundations really started during World War I, it was formally founded in 1946, straight after the Second World War, with an agreement on cooperation around signals intelligence called UQSA. A couple of years later, it welcomed Canada into the pact, and by the mid-1950s, both Australia and New Zealand had officially joined. So it's safe to say that the partnership is steeped in history. It's time-honoured, it's battle-tested, and comprised of trusted and importantly vetted intelligence professionals across all disciplines. At the heart of this relationship are shared common values and fundamental interests in both the defence and the promotion of free and open societies, democracies, and of course the rule of law. And that's what's made the partnership so enduring and also indeed expansive. So while it started at that heart of that SIGINT community, over time the scope of the partnership has really expanded to and evolved in response to both the changing threat environment, but also the rapidly changing technological landscape. So today, arguably, it's the most complex and far-reaching intelligence alliance in history. And importantly, it's unparalleled by any single or coalition of pacing threats. So having said all that, I think the more important question might be the why. Of course, integrating the intelligence capabilities of 5 nations and the analytic horsepower is better than just one. Obviously, our 5 intelligence communities are more powerful when they operate together than if any one nation was to perform the same task in isolation. But it's more than that. I think I mentioned we face shared threats. We have the same national security challenges and have shared objectives. We have capabilities in tradecraft that are interoperable, compatible, and complementary. The partnership is mature and interdependent. We trust each other and have a strong unity of effort. I want to be clear, this doesn't suggest that the collective abrogates respective national priorities or focus, nor does it commit to agreement on everything. But it's the transparency and the robustness of this honest relationship that drives the underlying discussions and debates, decisions and actions that really is at the heart of the power of this partnership. Right. So the nature of the trust that is established does allow for true burden sharing and complex problem solving. These things in combination make us more lethal and more efficient. And to put it simply, we're better than some of the parts. So that's really what I think makes the partnership not only very important, as you asked, but also very powerful.
Yeah, definitely. And as you noted that, of course, it's evolved over time. And one of the ways in which it's evolved, at least in recent years, is to create a position like the one you occupy now. So, so tell us a little bit about your role as Deputy Director for Commonwealth Integration, which is based at DIA. What are your responsibilities and your priorities? And how do you single-handedly cover the entire defense intelligence enterprise on behalf of 4 countries from your perch at the Defense Intelligence Agency?
Well, thank you, Larry. That's a lot of confidence you put in me. I'm not doing this single-handedly. We have great, strong leadership on this partnership across the entire enterprise and at every level. And I will just say here, I refer to we often, and that's because I'm a little schizophrenic right now and that I do work for the US. So when I say we, I'm mostly, almost exclusively referring to us here in the US. So of course, beyond the great leadership we have, there are a significant number of embedded 5I personnel, as well as liaison officers that are strategically placed throughout the enterprise. Unlike liaison officers, I don't work on behalf of the 4 Commonwealth nations. Instead, I do, as you mentioned, work for DIA and to our director and the leadership as a principal advisor on 5I integration issues. Sometimes that makes me a bit of a translator, but importantly, I inherently bring a deep partner perspective, which adds another voice to the conversation and is probably something only a relative outsider can do. The position itself was established, and as you say, it's relatively new. It was established by then Director Lieutenant General Vince Stewart in 2015, who saw a key role for an embedded Commonwealth officer to act as that principal advisor on 5I partner and integration issues. But in establishing this position, he really was enacting the practical embodiment of the major partner integration lines of effort that are consistently expressed throughout the US strategy. So the National Defence Strategy, the Defence Intelligence Strategy, and indeed DIA's nested strategy for partner integration. The Office of the DDCI serves to identify, advocate, coordinate, and champion 5I integration initiatives. Importantly, this includes identifying and addressing, where possible, the barriers that limit better integration. The vision is to completely harness the critical force multiplying benefits of the 5I partnership in support of delivering the overwhelming advantage to decision makers and warfighters. So you asked about priorities as well. You know, as 5 nations, we do take great pride in the fact that we've fought alongside each other in every major military conflict for around a century. But we don't simply rely on that shared history, and we can't, put in blood and treasure as it may be. We must continue to position this alliance for the next great age of technological advancement and to succeed in the face of disruptions that continue to jolt us in our global order. So as we posture ourselves in that ever-changing operating landscape, and collectively embrace new technologies, particularly those that help us manage huge volumes of data. We need to continue to ensure that our interoperability and our ability to share at all levels and at the speed of mission and relevance is there. And this is not just across the Five Eyes, but also beyond. It's, when we talked briefly about conflict and being together for a century on the battlefield, it's never just been the Five Eyes working side by side in those operations. So a big part of what we as a collective need to work on today is to understand how we can share at the speed of relevance with important third-party partners inside future and yet to be determined coalitions. This will be a critical buffer in rising strategic competition.
Right. So, no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, well, we've always shared at the point of conflict in theatres, in those operational domains. As strategic competition continues, we need to ensure that intelligence mission integration remains a pillar of our future systems, our future capabilities. So integration can't be bolted on at the end. We need to continue to build it in. So that's probably some of my greatest priorities, to be honest.
Right. Okay. No, and you mentioned, of course, technology and the need to collaborate at speed and in real time. And we'll talk about some of those opportunities and challenges a little bit later. But I wanted to get a sense strategically, what are the biggest challenges and opportunities for Five Eyes defense and intelligence collaboration? Technology is certainly going to be a part of it, but I think there are others as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it'll surprise anyone for me to say that I think the greatest challenges oscillate around a combination of technology, policy, culture, and risk. With every challenge, there is plenty of opportunity. So I'm happy to address very briefly each of them. We've talked briefly about technology, and I also know that you've had deep professionals with significant experience on this platform and in your forums already addressing, the issue with vast amounts of data now available every day. But today we have incalculable amounts of data that has actually surpassed our traditional analytic and processing capacity. The good news is, of course, it's also driven new developments in technologies like big data processing, artificial intelligence, and automated machine learning. So to that end, we need to harness one of our challenges and an opportunity is to harness the full capabilities available to us through these technologies, but ensure, as I mentioned before, that as we develop them, we do so with partners and integration in mind. So it can be really resource intensive if we don't start, whether it be our analysis or indeed our systems, our processes, our plans, our training activities, or even building facilities without a deep understanding of who we ultimately will need and want to share and integrate with.
Right.
So we need to account for partners as we build and adopt technologies and processes. That probably includes building with a mindset to protect and not to restrict. So if we link technology,
go ahead.
To cultural, which is I think the next one I mentioned, harnessing new technologies will almost certainly change our analytic culture. And we need to make sure that we evolve that together and that we learn from each other and leverage the unique contributions that each of us make in technology leaps. Sticking again with culture, there can be, of course, something very quite countercultural about intelligence sharing, particularly for new or less experienced intelligence professionals. So our line of work actively encourages secrecy and suspicion with regard to motives. And of course, that is really important. But as a result, the value of partnerships or even figuring out whom to partner with and how to partner can sometimes be lost on those who have not yet experienced it firsthand or who lack the inherent understanding required for trust. So this office, the DDCI's office, we do work very hard to help new analysts build these connections across different communities of interest. So when it comes to policy, the third on the list, before we get to risk, we are all, as 5 nations, operating 5th generation technology and capabilities. But it's probably fair to say that in many cases, we're using them under 1st generation policies. We really do, I think, spend a lot of time and energy interpreting a complex library of often outdated and inefficient policies. So we do need to strive to ensure that our technology is governed by policies that account for the changes, the developments, as not only the threat, but in that tech landscape. And sometimes policy and culture clash together, and it has the real potential to delay or dilute the desired outcome that was intended at the top. So finally, on risk, we need to ensure that we maintain a comprehensive and broad appreciation of the risk, and that includes the risk of inaction. To know and understand the nature of the Five Eye Intelligence Partnership is to recognise that quite often the greater risk is that of not sharing.
Mm-hmm.
I do just want to finish this part. I think it's important to say that none of this or anything I say is to suggest for one moment that there isn't a need for truly national eyes-only caveats. There is, and there always will be. But the key to integration is definitely knowing that the need to know principle and the need to share principle can coexist.
Right.
So building that into our foundation as we move forward will make us more interoperable in peace and in conflict.
So let me jump in some of the points you talked about the need to share or the imperative to share and balance security with a question that we got from the audience from Jetta Breslow, who asks about the role that open source intelligence plays, because certainly I know INSA did an event recently on the role of open source intelligence and the importance of it. And one issue that came up repeatedly was that the use of open source makes it easier for the United States to share information with allies and partners. Within the Five Eyes framework, we have a framework where we can share classified information, but then using open source intelligence also broadens the aperture of what can be shared. So what role does open source intelligence play in the Five Eyes framework as well?
Yeah, thank you, Jetta, for that question. It's a great question. And I think over the last couple of years, we've really appreciated the depth and the capacity of open source. As you say, it does allow for broad and faster sharing. And that's really important. As a collective, we want to be able to share. It helps with tipping and queuing, and it actually becomes, I think, a target for some of these technologies that we're talking about, where we can embrace machine learning and AI to help us sort through, because it is a huge data set. Without a doubt, open source is an incredibly large and agile data set. And you know, historically, I think we've too often as a community sought to find that really great, exquisite bit of information. And we are getting, and we should be getting much better at really delving into open source and using that for the value it represents.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about the broad intelligence sharing, particularly, I guess, on strategic challenges and in a policy framework. But how does the partnership set its priorities and decide what kinds of intelligence, strategic intelligence, to share? And then how does it decide what sort of tactical intelligence to share? And as you mentioned, the 5 countries have fought together on the battlefield for many years. What are the challenges of getting tactical intelligence to multinational units out in the field?
Yeah, sure. Great question. Let me start with strategic. So in general, the Five Eyes, and I mentioned this before, they draw strategic priorities from common national security threats along with shared mission objectives. I said it before, but this doesn't abrogate respective national priorities. We each take our direction from our national leaders, and priorities come from standing national directions, such as white papers and defence and security strategies. Having said that up front, for the very same reason that our partnership exists, that is the shared common values, deep abiding respect for liberty, and importantly, shared national security challenges, we collectively align. So from a practical stance there, we achieve this through a pretty comprehensive set of governance forums across the Five Eye enterprise, ensuring that as an enterprise, we can remain agile and deliberate in our approach to meeting those shared objectives. So, you know, for the tactical level, by some measure, I often think we have actually been more successful in sharing in operational than we have at home. I think it's inherently easier to build trust based on understanding of the teammate that is actually sitting or eating or fighting alongside. I mentioned this to a colleague today in the office, and they retorted with deployments are where bureaucracy goes to die. So I'll leave that with you, but it resonated with my point that I was dwelling on. I also think quite seriously in operational environments, it becomes very clear very quickly that the greater risk is actually that of not sharing.
Right.
And I think that's really important looking into the future. I think we should be alert to the fact that we may not compete in a traditional field environment, nor be physically located beside one another. And indeed, in new domains that are not bound by geography, our geostrategic locations may be a critical contribution. So we really need to ensure we continue to normalise sharing and integration, including from our capitals.
Right. Well, I'm glad you brought up domains where we might not be physically in the same space, because I also want to ask you about some of the newest domains that affect our national security, cyber and space. So let's talk about cyber. Cyber attacks by state actors and criminal groups have disrupted critical infrastructure functions in countries around the world. We've seen a number of high-profile attacks in the United States in recent months, and offensive cyber operations are now a key part of military planning. So how does the Five Eyes partnership work together to better understand, mitigate, and combat hostile cyber operations? And how do coordinated intelligence collection and intelligence sharing play a role? And let me just add to that a question that we got from the audience that's related from Nora Larkin about Five Eyes collaboration on cyber threats, in particular from Russia and China.
Look, I can't speak on behalf of Cybercom or NSA. But in any intelligence discipline or domain, sharing is critical in establishing, understanding, and remaining informed of the strategic perspectives and operational picture. So that common operational picture. In all domains across the Five Eyes, we seek to collaborate and leverage our collective and individual capabilities to deter and counter threats and achieve shared objectives. I alluded to it a moment ago, but this domain, along with space, is not bound by geography. So we really do potentially face a globally dispersed theatre of operations. So it's even more critical than ever that we work on our ability to not only integrate, but to do that at the speed of mission across the Five Eyes and probably beyond. You know, I might just add, before I get to Nora's question, and while I've talked a lot about the unique history and trust within the Five Eye partnership, and that's what makes it a true relationship, we also don't integrate or share just to feel good about ourselves. We integrate for effect, and there is inherent self-interest. You know, it makes America and their allies stronger and safer, and that's declared in your interim national security strategy and in a range of other guiding documents. To Nora's question, certainly our adversaries have shown their strengths, and I just really refer you to even my director's unclassified testimony in where those threats lie, and certainly they do seek to use those domains short of military conflict.
Okay, so let's move on to space and talk about how the Five Eyes partners collaborate in the space domain. And let me also insert a question that we received from Scott Bennett with Predecessor, who asks how you coordinate bilateral data sharing of commercial satellite imagery between Five Eyes and assured trusted suppliers.
That's a great question, which I'll come back to. And I might put it back to Scott or some of your audience there to think about. But again, I want to make sure I cannot speak on behalf of US Spacecom, but the command has clearly articulated, and back to Nora's previous question, that our competitors have demonstrated their determination to hold our space capabilities at risk. So while this is perhaps the newest domain, the US and allied militaries use space systems and have for some time to connect, to warn, to guide and inform decisions across the entire spectrum of conflict, from space all the way down to the last tactical mile. And I do believe that this new domain is being built for integration from the ground up, with real opportunity to overcome some of our aforementioned integration challenges. We also have a real opportunity to shape the characteristics of space warfare and generate the future workforce, you know, to build the next generation of data warriors who will manage and analyze information as it traverses networks that expand and contract to meet different mission demands as it goes. So it's a really exciting space. To Scott's question on how we collaborate, you know, I think it's, all I'd say is that I think it's really important for industry to consider and to have a good understanding of the Five Eye partnership and the sharing, and really appreciate, even beyond that, the end users of that which systems, processes or capabilities that you're working on. And to do that really does provide an enhanced capability. And so I encourage industry to think about, you know, when we get, think about what the end user is. How do we make data not only machine readable and consistent, but shareable and accessible? And if it's not, it might be that people are coming back to ask about that kind of thing. So, but there certainly are many bilateral, multilateral arrangements that make this stuff happen.
Sure. Let me add a follow-up question there that we received from Stuart Levin, asking about whether export control policies have any impact on the sharing of geospatial intelligence and imagery. Within the Five Eyes framework, does that pose any problems?
I'm going to have to declare that not within the scope of my understanding.
Okay, fair enough.
And it's not an issue that I have any expertise on or I can comment on, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. So I also want to get on to Five Eyes policy and governance issues because, as you said, this has been an arrangement that's in place for a long time, but it's constantly evolving. And there is some talk periodically about broadening Five Eyes missions and the scope of the partnership. So as you noted, the partnership has its roots as far back as World War II, and then it was broadened again in the 1950s to include new countries to address Cold War threats. In the aftermath of 9/11, of course, the partnership shifted its focus from Cold War threats to counterterrorism and other transnational challenges. So should the Five Eyes framework adjust again by addressing a wider range of state actors and non-state threats? So we've talked about cyber and space and other things, but should it broaden to the global scope of threats that we all face? And should it expand beyond intelligence into a broader security partnership that can encompass economics, information, diplomacy, and other things, almost like a G5, I guess, instead of just a Five Eyes?
No, I think it's important at the outset to recognise that while we have rapidly responded to threats and issues that you highlighted, none of them represented a complete shift in defence of other enduring issues, threats, or collaboration. So as a partnership, we have remained adaptable and agile in responding to evolving threats over time. And for sure, it runs deeper than security cooperation in the military. We've seen the media and our respective ministers and secretaries of defence refer to themselves as Five Eyes and have Five Eye minister meetings. But how far it expands and the broader narrative that surrounds this issue are really considerations for national policymakers.
Right. So you may have the same answer then, but there's also been discussion, of course, of expanding the Five Eyes to more than Five Eyes. There's been discussion about including India, Japan, South Korea. Some experts have recommended France and Germany. Is expanding the Five Eyes to other countries being seriously considered? And as you've operated within the Five Eyes framework, what would be the challenges of expanding that to Seven Eyes, Nine Eyes, or whatever?
Yeah, again, and you hit it right when you started, that this really is an issue for national leaders and policymakers. But without wanting to state the obvious, individually and collectively, the Five Eye partners all have established and maintained really important other security relationships and partners. You know, with regards to the uniqueness and what might be difficult, I've talked a lot about the trust and the enduring nature of the Five Eye Intelligence Partnership, which is really what makes it that unique. But it's important equally to highlight that it doesn't limit, prevent, or negate the requirement for strong and effective partnerships, particularly with other like-minded democracies. So, you know, we are not just about a shared language, and let me say, sometimes we do need a translation in there. We don't share everything. We don't share the same words all the time. But you know, what we do have is over 100 years of building that trust, which has led to interoperability and interdependence and true burden sharing. And that's really the unique part. But as I said, it doesn't limit, prevent, or negate the requirement for other partners.
Right. Let me also draw on a point that you've made a couple of times now about the importance of sharing information at speed. Back in, I think it was 2017, just before the Five Eyes ministerial that took place in Ottawa, INSA's then president wrote an op-ed in Defense One arguing that the Five Eyes partnership had to adapt by speeding the sharing of information on cyber threats and other challenges. So this has been an issue that has been, certainly a concern for a number of years. What are the greatest challenges to not only sharing information, but sharing it at speed? Is that a policy challenge, a technology challenge, or something else?
Yeah, look, it's a combination of both. We really can't rely on processes that were designed around old technologies of the past in order to really capitalize on what new technologies bring us. And And, really as the speed of information and indeed conflict will increase, so too must the speed of sharing. And in the future, it'll be at the speed of machine. So AI and ML play real roles in this. They serve as that connective tissue between tradecraft and policy. They enable automation and speed up routine processes and highlight or find new information so that analysts, with all those beautiful human qualities that they have and not machine qualities, can focus on some really critical questions.
Yep.
In terms of the technology, last year you interviewed Miss White, our Deputy Director, and she spoke about our role in providing foundational military intelligence.
Right.
And the transition from MIDB, being a 30-year-old database, to MARS. And that's really been a transformational approach. And it became a program of record in December 2020. And for the last year, DIA, along with broader IC and 5I partners, have been collaborating to ensure that MARS has the right technology, tradecraft, and policies to get after this issue of maximising the speed of sharing. You're right, though, it covers all three areas.
Great. Well, let me ask another question about technology collaboration, because it's good to hear that that kind of collaboration has taken place on Mars. And we've talked a lot about, of course, sharing information, whether it's raw data or finished analysis, but there's also a lot of collaboration on technology development and technology applications that could be done to draw on the expertise of people in all 5 countries. So you probably read the Intelligence Task Force report that came out of CSIS, a leading think tank, in recent months. I think it was back in January. And it argued that U.S. intelligence must reimagine its closest liaison partnerships from ones centered on intelligence sharing to ones of intelligence generation, building a full spectrum intelligence partnership that jointly develops technology and executes technology-enabled intelligence missions. So with that argument in mind, what kinds of Five Eyes collaboration takes place regarding those emerging technologies like AI or machine learning that can generate new intelligence from shared data, or that can be used to execute a joint intelligence or technology-enabled intelligence mission?
Yeah, look, it shouldn't surprise anyone that these are key areas that are driving our cooperation today. And we did touch on both the unimaginable amounts of data that analysts are now receiving every day, and also on our collaboration on Mars. There are several examples to include computer algorithms deployed through Project MAJGEN. Mars is obviously AI and ML. These technologies are connecting users across the enterprise in order to collaborate and process really large amounts of data. So this is really required to ensure that DAA provides the level of detail necessary to rapidly produce precise and really high quality assessments in support of global operations.
Okay.
In doing so, we do leverage commercial best practice and industry technology. That's a really critical part when we come to these 5G, AI, ML. We also leverage cloud computing to enable the enterprise's various systems to keep pace with data sources and ingest both military and civilian infrastructure data. But technologies and tools like this really, we need them as we move forward. We need to ensure that the systems, the platforms, and the people have access to data when and where they need it. What do they say? Whoever owns the data owns the initiative. This really is about getting at US military and its allies having the competitive advantage to stay ahead of threats in any domain.
Great. Let me ask one question of my own, and then we'll move to some additional audience questions that have come in. Many of our audience members today come from industry, from some of the large contractors that support the intelligence community. So how can private contractors work with the intelligence community to facilitate information sharing and collaboration between the United States and its Five Eyes partners?
Yeah, that's a great question. We touched on it briefly before, but I really think bearing in mind that end user, having an appreciation of the importance of partnerships and collaboration allow us to imagine that whatever we're building, whether it be a system, a process, a capability, will be shared or integrated into other systems. So I know that so many are aware of it, but if you set that end user in mind and you don't limit yourself to just being a US end user, then it's going to really support our integration mission.
So developing systems or technologies with releasability or sharing in mind from the outset rather than adjusting it afterwards.
Absolutely. You can't surge integration. You can't surge it it's never, and I mentioned before, it's never as efficient and effective when it's bolted on. It can become really quite resource intensive, and you know, throughout history at times we've tried to add it on once we've got something clear and good, and then we share it. But if we can imagine at the very foundational level the purpose that this will one day be shared, used, or integrated indeed with other systems, then it changes the way we look at it and the way that it gets built in order to be interoperable and integrated.
Right, and that makes sharing and collaboration more of a core function rather than an add-on function, so that's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, well, let me turn to some audience questions. We've gotten quite a few, so we may not be able to get to all of them. But the first one here is from a British journalist named Michael Smith, who asks, do you believe that Australia's contribution to Five Eyes increased exponentially with the Australian contribution to the war on terror and the presence in Iraq? And has it gone on to a much higher level with concern over China?
They are really great questions, and I will start by saying I don't speak on behalf of Australia in this role. I am here in DAA. Can you hear me? I can still see you, but I don't know if you can hear me. Larry, I think I might have lost you.
Well, hello, General McGuinness. I'm John Doyne. I'm Larry's colleague, and I will jump in and pick up. He is definitely frozen. So
I didn't know if it was me or him there.
That was an interesting question about, we can, we can go ahead and move on to another one. And one that I was thinking about was, can you tell me what was your biggest surprise, perhaps, as you took this new assignment, arriving here last year? What was your biggest surprise that surprised you?
Yeah, so I came in January, and I must confess I'm a 3-time repeat offender. This is my 3rd time posting here. But the diversity, and I was no stranger to DIA, having worked in counterpart organizations, but the incredible professionalism, capability, diversity of this incredible agency, you know, continued to surprise me, and I certainly learnt exponentially times more about it than I knew, and I would have said I thought I knew it. So it's a fabulous agency. It's a great honour and privilege to be here. Yeah, I just encourage those who may be looking for a role in the intelligence community. There isn't much that you can't do here in DIA. It's a fabulous organisation.
Great. And I see Larry is back. Are you back, Larry? Can you give us a sign of life? Oh, he's back on my screen.
He's back on my screen too.
I hope you can hear me now. Sorry, you know, every once in a while I thank the gods at Verizon for giving me good internet connection throughout the pandemic, but of course nothing is ever perfect. So hopefully I'm back now for good. Thank you, John, for jumping in. Hopefully I didn't miss anything too interesting.
No, I'll let you continue, and you're almost to the wrap-up point. So take it away.
Great. So let me go to a couple of other questions we've gotten here from audience members. We have a few minutes left. Chris Center has asked, should there be more multinational training and education of intelligence analysts?
Yes, yeah, there is quite a bit of multinational training, but understanding is what's required for trust, and training together builds understanding. So yeah, at various levels, there should absolutely, and there are, you know, I think as we come out of this COVID environment that's constrained us, we've certainly seen us adjust to the unclaimed environment in order to accommodate those that are working from home. And so I do think that we've also learnt some of those lessons about the agility and value of training and the platforms that we can use reliably around the world.
Yep. And here we have a question from Marcel Lettra of Lockheed Martin, former Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and an active INSA member, who asked, what is the one thing you wish you could do to bring the Five Eyes community closer together?
Now that's a great question, and thank you, Ms. Lettra, for that question. You know, so much of it in my experience comes down to physical relationships and experience. So for all the young amazing, talented, inspirational DIA analysts that I meet, I'd love to stick them in a room with a bunch of Five Eye partners so that they can see and feel for themselves that they are similar, that they have similar tradecraft, that they can communicate and they can share, and to have that personal experience. And I tell you, it makes a world of difference across senior US officers who've worked with partners and have had that personal experience. And you can't teach that and you can't buy that. It just has to happen.
Yeah. And then we have an interesting question from Jim Noon of Global Dimensions, who notes that RAF Whiten in the United Kingdom was the first integrated Five Eyes center. And he asks, have any others stood up? And are there plans for additional future centers, perhaps one that's focused on Asian issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. The center at Whiten is a great center. It is a discussion. It is a decision for policymakers and leaders, but it's certainly shown its value and potential.
Yeah. And then before we wrap up, a question from Marianne Brogdale at KPMG, who asks how you've seen intel sharing evolve during your career and your tenure here at DIA, and what lessons or experiences will you take back to Australia?
Hey, thank you. Great question. I think our integration and sharing evolves in line with the threat. Over my career, I've seen that in times of heightened threat, it's back to that simple principle that it's very clear that the risk of not sharing is the greater risk. And when we deploy together, it goes up and down. And lessons back to Australia is to continue to remain engaged post-COVID world and in an environment, if we haven't got the same op tempo, is still to ensure that there's consistent training and interoperability occurring at all levels.
Yeah, and I'm told that my camera had dropped in the midst of a question I was posing, so let me see if I can ask that again, about whether Australian intelligence sharing had become more robust during the war on terror and the operations in Iraq, and if it's getting more robust now that China is a greater concern.
You know, as someone who lives as an Australian, I'm not really a good objective determinant of that. It's always been a key aspect of my career is integration with our Five Eye partners. So I'm sorry, I'm probably not a good external judge for that. And I did start to respond before you cut out to that, I don't speak for Australia in this job. I do work for General Berrier. But it's a really interesting question, and I think history books will reflect on it closely.
Yeah, great. And then I'll end, I guess, with one comment from an audience member, James Clapper, known to many of us, former Director of National Intelligence, who says he doesn't really have a question, but a comment, and we'd invite you to share your thoughts too, General. He says, I believe the time has come to eliminate the no foreign caveat and other nations' equivalents between and among the Five Eyes nations and extend dual citizenship obligations whenever we are in each other's intelligence footprint. So how does that resonate with you?
And Mr. Clapper has a huge amount of experience, and I take his comments as incredibly relevant and important. You know, my predecessor spoke a lot about no fawn, and he called it yes fawn. He had a campaign of yes fawn. You know, as a career intelligence professional, I understand those reasons that drive for eyes only issues, and I stand, as I said earlier, that there's a reason for them. I think that they could be well known, they could be better known and better understood so as to not misuse them. And that goes for all partners. Yeah,
makes sense. I think we are running out of time and coming to the end of our time together. Do you have any other last thoughts you'd like to share?
No, just thank you so much for the opportunity. I didn't realize that I was the first Five Eye partner, so it is a great privilege, and I hope that I've been able to share with those partners, and thank you for the service that you provide.
No, thank you very much. And thank you for sharing your insights with us today. We really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, of course, to everyone online for watching today. And thank you, Booz Allen Hamilton, for supporting the program. When the webinar ends, there'll be a short survey that pops up. So please do take a few moments to complete it and let us know how we did. Looking ahead briefly, tomorrow, June 24th at 2 o'clock, we'll hold a panel discussion focused on remote work and the national security mission, with speakers from NGA, the US Air Force, LMI, and Applied Insight. On July 7, I'll moderate another discussion like the one we had today with Rear Admiral Mike Studeman, the Director for Intelligence J2 at US Indo-Pacific Command, who will share his insights about China, US defense strategy in Asia, and a range of challenges and opportunities in the Indo-Pacific region. On July 12th through 16th, INSA will hold our new IC, Empowering Women and Engaging Men Virtual Symposium, which will feature a live in-person networking event on the evening of Thursday, July 15th. And last week, we opened registration for the William Oliver Baker Award Dinner, taking place on Saturday, September 25th at the Omni Shoreham Hotel in the district. We expect nearly 700 IC and national security leaders to be on hand when we celebrate former Principal Deputy DNI, the Honorable Sue Gordon. It should be a memorable evening, and hope you can join us. Lastly, we'll soon open registration for the Intelligence and National Security Summit, which will take place live and in person at the Gaylord Conference Center in National Harbor on September 13 and 14. Save the dates and look for an announcement from us very soon. You can find the full lineup of our virtual events on insaonline.org. This concludes today's program. Stay safe and healthy, and have a wonderful afternoon.